March 9th Special Environment Committee meeting. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting virtually through the traditional territories of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And bring us to our first item is the approval of the agenda. All in favor? Opposed? Agenda approved. The next is the adoption of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Minutes approved. And it brings us to the first item of the meeting today. And I guess before we begin, the main purpose of this meeting is to go through the revisions and have discussion on the policies for the green portion of the official community plan. There's going to be some committee meeting members that have to leave at 6 o'clock, and it's going to affect our quorum. So my preference is to keep presentations and everything very brief and just hit the revisions and just go for it. And just for committee members, keep your comments brief and concise, and so that we can move through as many of the points as we possibly can, because there are some important things to address. And if there's items that seem to be ballooning in discussion, I might interject to park it for when we have more time, so that we can get through items that we can get to some agreements on. And a big thanks to Ting and Lisa for taking our feedback that we provided before and putting it into a slide progression that will help us more easily get through these items. So I will pass it over to Ting and Lisa, and they might discuss a little bit about the structure of things, and then we'll get right into the revisions. And I may move some items for discussion later on, just so that we don't get tripped up on things that won't have a direct impact to policy. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask Dave to share the screen. And Councillor Gaspar, in light of what you've said, I'm going to shorten out my piece before turning over to Ting to get into the meat. So Dave, if you could just pull up our agenda for us and go to the next slide, please. And so this is what we're going to cover with you today. I'm going to spend literally less than a minute on the first agenda item. So next slide, please. And then we're going to get straight to number 2. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Dave. So what I just wanted to point out to you, and you've now hopefully had some sense of seeing the whole document as released to Council last week on the 28th and to the community at large on the 1st, is that some of the areas you're interested in are woven throughout the document. So today we're going to focus quite strongly on the policy side with Ting, looking at some of the wording that you've provided in previous meetings and how it's been addressed in the plan. If we could go to the next slide, please. And this is just in terms of when you're navigating the document, showing how the policies are integrated. There are guides or icons that allow those linkages to be seen clearly. So here you see a section looking at greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And then on the lower side, you'll see the climate adaptation, solid waste management, and policies that are woven in to support that policy. So with that, Dave, if you can navigate us to the section where Ting will be walking us through. I'm going to, next slide, next slide, next slide. I'm not going to go through these. You've got it in your agenda package. Next slide. And I'm going to turn over to Ting, because this is, I think, where the meat of the discussion comes. And if we have time and you have questions about the other part, we can do that. So with great pleasure, I turn over to Ting Pan. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you.
You can hear me okay, I hope. Good evening, everyone. So I just first want to say thank you for those of you that provided comments and the feedback. They're really thoughtful and really constructive feedback, and I really appreciate that. And also want to maybe apologize in advance. We had a very short turnaround, so we had a few days to incorporate these comments before we finalized the agenda. So if there's anything that we missed, please know that it's not by intention, and do speak up if you find something that was amiss. So I will start with the February 22nd draft. So this is the content that you're seeing in the draft city plan, and it was after our January 26th meeting. And then I'm gonna go through the slides and really talk through the changes and the comments that were received after this February 22nd draft. So some of the updates that we made into the draft were kind of the comments we received from the last meeting, and changing up the title, make it simpler, easier, and more direct. So next slide, please. Thank you. And also there's quite a bit of feedback on whether we want to actually group them into larger headings and capture some of the same themes. So these are some potential grouping of the topics. We did not make that change into the draft because we realized that it was a bigger change, but it doesn't mean that we cannot make that change in the next iteration. And the next slide. Thank you. So I wonder if, I think we do have the Zoom poll here. We don't really want to spend a lot of time on this, but we just want to get a sense of whether, we feel like we want to keep the existing topics. Now you see the draft city plan, or you want to us to explore further and collapsing into fewer headings. So if you don't mind.
And we can take the poll on this, folks, and then we'll come back and have further discussion depending on how the poll goes.
Exactly. So we'll give you a few seconds to put in your answer. And Dave, let me know if
So far, we have 5 responses to the poll. So, sorry, Sky, I'm not sure how many participants we have. 6 now.
There are 6 here.
Okay, so we'll end the poll then now, and I'll share the results.
And he needed that, and so they just said they don't know what
Okay.
to schedule, so they gave them
that's great to know. Okay, so it seems like the majority are thinking about keeping the existing topics. Okay, if you want to have more discussion on this later on, we can come back.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for the update. I appreciate that. Have a good night. Yeah, nice to see you. Okay,
Oh, I think we'll have some background noise there.
Make sure that your screens are
Thanks.
muted.
Okay, next slide. We added a new paragraph in why is green enamel important for our future, based on Lindsay's comments last time. Just more speak directly to the kind of human dimensions of engaging our members on environmental behaviors. So I just want to point it out, that's one major change. Next slide. We also developed some new infographics for the greenhouse gas emission reduction section, highlighting more on the climate emergency declaration, and also illustrating just where we are, right now in the business as usual case versus where we want to be. And the next slide. And this graphic we developed really just to show kind of the relative impacts of different strategies, and also plotted against the spectrum of municipal influence to give the reader some context. There are strategies that we have more control of, like our city fleet and facilities, but they make up about 1% of overall community emissions. And then our biggest opportunities are really in electric vehicle adoption and building retrofits, but you can see that it was further down the scale in terms of our municipal influence. So I hope that helps kind of, put some context into just, how to be strategic about reducing our overall emissions. Next slide. And we have revised the transportation policy statement on page 56. The original reading, the statement kind of, we realized that there are many different interpretations and also seemed too broad. And also we're thinking that, it might be quite difficult to actually evaluate what does it mean to actually have access. It's very loosely defined. So we we basically made a new statement that is directly tied to our overall kind of zero carbon emissions goal. And these trips can be human powered through active transportation or through e-bikes, other zero emission vehicles. So we captured all of them.
But Ting, are these revisions will show up in the policy statement regardless of whether we make any motions or not?
They are in the draft, and you can certainly still make motions to change that.
Great. So they're in the draft already. That's perfect. That's all. Yeah. That was my only question. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So here I'll just kind of give you a rundown of all the changes and some of the considerations. So when we're making these changes.
Great.
Okay. Next one. Thank you. Okay. So now we're getting to the new comments since our last meeting. So there's a desire to, have a policy statement about advocating to the provincial government. Right now, they're in the action plan. So the question here for the committee is that would you like to see, is that something that we should have in the city plan or action plan? We put in the action plan because it seems like it's a very specific, time-limited kind of action that we can do in the next 5 years, whereas the city plan is really meant to have a longer kind of lifespan and meant to be broader. So that's one question that we'd like to ask the committee.
Any comments on this?
I think maybe we can just make it as simple, like if our committee members can speak up, yes or no, or in the city plan or action plan.
Wally?
I think it's important it be in there. I know I was part of the committee that did the Regional District Solid Waste Master Plan, and now it did require official provincial approval by the Ministry of Environment, but there were certain requests in there for the province to give additional powers to RDN for waste management. If you don't make the request, it won't happen. Also, if you want to lobby the province or go and use UBCM and other municipalities, having that in a statement approved by council is going to give you some ammunition to do it. So I think there's only positive things in putting it in there.
Great. Any comments? Any comments to the negative of not having it in the official community plan? Okay. If we could, I guess we can go ahead, Lisa.
So, Councillor Gaspar, I know we're going to make some recommendations from this committee, and I just thought it'd be helpful, and I'll ask Guy for a little bit of guidance, that you could. So Sky, is it possible, given how we're trying to get all the feedback into Reimagine before council as a whole, can they go through and make all of the suggestions and then at the end make a recommendation to the next GPC on Monday for council to look at it?
Yes,
rather than doing one each time?
That would be appropriate.
Okay. So does that make sense, Councillor?
I think, we can just, I'm not sure if anything got lost, but I mean, we could just make a motion recommending that a policy statement about advocating to the provincial government for additional powers and policy to meet climate goals city plan, be recommended by the committee to go to the GPC or something like that for things that we need to vote on.
I was just wondering if, for efficiency, do you need a motion for each one, Sky, or?
Well, it depends if it might be easier to have a motion for each one in case some of the committee members agree on some and disagree for others.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just to clarify that it is currently captured in the action plan. The question is, do you want to have this item moved into the city plan?
Yeah. So just put it on the table. I move to have it included and to have the policy statement about advocating the provincial government for additional powers and policy tools to meet city's climate goals be in the city plan or action plan. I'll move that. Or should be moved into the city plan.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Anybody want to second that? Seconded by Harvey. All in favor? Turn your video on. See your hands go up. Okay. Anybody opposed? Motion carried.
Great, thank you. All right, I will move on to the next one. So in policy, I hope that you have the draft city plan in front of you. So there is a, oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. That is the slide. So there is some benchmark years referenced in policy C1.1.4 about accelerated new carbon and energy efficient building design before 2026 instead of 2030, and require this for all new construction after 2028 instead of 2030. So the question is, do you support this change?
Anybody would like to speak to that, and then like to hear from staff on their opinion, and then we can just call a vote on it. Jerome?
Just a quick question. I'm not sure where the 26 number comes from. Is it just because that's a reasonable target, or how did that number come up?
Lisa?
I thought, Ting, if we could explain. So one of the things we did circulate to you was a track change document showing some changes. So Ting, maybe you'd like to help provide some opinions and guidance about where this came from.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good question. So in that document, you will see that this particular comment and the suggestion came from Councillor Brown. And I do not know where those years suggested are coming from. This is an action, like in terms of looking at how to accelerate zero carbon energy efficient building design, probably through adopting of higher step codes in the energy step code. It is in our work plan. Typically, we'll go through a bit of like a consultation process, especially with the development and building industry, to figure out how to accelerate these practices. But there is a suggestion in the document, and these are the years that are being proposed. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was a suggestion, just looking at the current numbers are, partly already mandated, and this would just kind of increase the city's efforts to speed it up a little bit.
But on that topic, like when I read that sentence, to me, I mean, accelerate zero carbon and energy. So it can be, it's both sort of kind of specific and wide open at the same time. It's kind of like, so what does that really mean? Are we aiming to have all buildings reach a certain sort of net zero goal by, earlier than we thought? Because when we talk about just accelerating building, energy efficient building design and practices, it just means let's design more of them without specifically saying what's the target that we're going for.
Right, through the chair, I think that's a very good point. And now I'm reading this again. I think what it really meant is to accelerate this requirements, which, the requirements for zero carbon buildings are gonna be in place by 2030. That's, the province already signaled that. So I think what it's really meant to say here is, do we want to have that requirements before 2030?
Right.
But we don't know whether it's going to be 2026 or 2028 or 2029.
Okay, so the sentence needs to be, I think, more specific to accelerate the rate at which we meet the 2030 provincial targets, right? We want to try to meet them earlier, because then if we refer to the provincial targets, then it's very clear what the outcome needs to be, because that's already decided. But the way it's written there is sort of wide open in terms of people can interpret this in all kinds of ways. So
Okay.
if there's a very clear, I guess my point is that there's a very clear metric at the end of this process, and that's what comes in at 2030 from the province. And what the idea of this statement, I think, is get there earlier than 2030.
Great. So what I'm hearing is that there are two parts to this. So one is that we should really adjust the wording to make it more clear that we're talking about accelerating that requirements. And the second question will be, now we understand that we're talking about accelerating requirements. do we want to keep the 2030 there, or do we want to specify the years in this policy statement?
Phew, good question.
Yeah, I think on this one, basically, one is accelerating it and then also moving forward the time that we require it. And so it's just kind of shifting everything forward 2 years from what we had it from before. And I think that was just the intention, is to just move things more forward quicker, I guess. I think that this one might, getting into the weeds on it, it could take a while to like actually sort through what we want.
Okay.
So is there any opinions? Do folks want to have it accelerated quicker than what it was before? The policy and how it's written was accelerate zero carbon energy efficient building design and practices for all new construction before, I think it was before 2028, and then require all new construction after 2030 was what it originally said, I think.
Through the chair, I think that we had 2030 in both. So let me just take a look at 1.1.4. Yes, so what is published right now in the draft city plan is the both saying that it was 2030.
Okay.
But isn't the province already mandating that after 2030, that's what new construction needs to look like?
That is correct.
So the last sentence isn't needed.
It is basically reinforcing that.
Right.
I think we should park this one and leave it as is unless there's strong opposition. Right now it says accelerate zero carbon energy efficient building design and practices for all new construction before 2030 and require this for all new construction after 2030.
Okay.
Anybody opposed to leaving it as is? Wally? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so can I take it that we do want to reword this? So that will, yeah. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So policy 1.1.5, support the upgrade of existing buildings so that all buildings achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Have this modified because there are some concerns about that might be unrealistic for old buildings. So there's some suggested alternative wording. So if I may, just before we have this discussion, just to share a few perspective on that. So again, this is going to be very much, it needs to be achieved if we want to achieve our overall targets. And the province has already signaled that they're going to not allow any fossil fuel furnaces and heating equipment or hot water systems that are less than 100% beyond 2030. So I think that this is within the realm of achievability, because after phasing out those equipments, they still have 20 years before 2050, and that is roughly the lifespan of any major heating systems. And the other point is that it's certainly efficiency is really important, but I think what really needs to happen to achieve those targets was really switching to clean renewable fuels. So that is also in line with the province push to electrifying existing buildings. So just want to put some of those considerations out there when you're contemplating the proposed wording.
Any comments on this one? I think how it was originally worded is the most ambitious, and it sounds like it is possible, so it might not be necessary to dampen it with realisticness of the upgrade.
I'm the one who wrote that, so I'll just speak to it because I feel that's thing. I understand your point, but energy efficiency is not simply about the heating system that you install. And so there are limits to what you can do with old houses in terms of improving the insulation and the efficiency, which is an extra, a major component of that efficiency equation, not just the type of fuel that you use to heat the place. And And so I just worry about extremely rigid net zero emission standards that may or may not be met. So I don't know how strong those requirements will be in terms of retrofitting old buildings. So if this is basically going to say we're going to try to get them there, but we may or may not get there, that's fine. I was trying to come up with wording that I think we need to have two different yardsticks for new buildings versus old ones that get retrofitted.
Because dinner is here, but we're willing to wait.
Okay, Wally, did you have a comment?
Can't hear you, Wally.
Oh,
There we are. Thank you. I realize it's pretty general right now, but I mean, I know there are building permit requirements for like structures like putting an elevated deck and so forth on. So it says upgrade of existing buildings, and that may not be a very old building, but it would be very onerous for somebody to try and do this and meet the requirements just because they're putting a deck on the house and need a building permit for it. So there's going to have to be guidelines as to what some of these things mean and what's the shut-off points for things. Because you could be doing upgrades, there's building code requirements and so forth that would click in, that you could not meet this necessarily the policy unless you did probably 3 times or 4 times or 5 times the amount of upgrade that you're doing. So that somehow this has to fit in with the actual building permit agenda too. Now, if you're saying by 2050, there's 30 years to do that.
Okay. Any more comments or suggested changes? We can vote on it. Don?
Well, I looked at this as instead of we require every single building to be net zero, why don't we just say, because this is a city plan, why don't we say the city will be net zero, which means that some buildings may be entirely off the grid and some buildings won't. And we know that, you know, for some of these older buildings are built to last 200 years. And so why don't we look at it as we will attempt to make the entire city buildings net zero, which means some won't and some will be even more.
Okay.
if I may, through the chair, just some further thoughts on on this. So there's the province is going to introduce greenhouse gas intensity limits for existing buildings pretty soon. It may not be through a permit process, but it will apply to all existing buildings. The details obviously are not available yet, but I just want to clarify that it doesn't necessarily mean that each building will have to go through extensive upgrades of putting insulations and changing windows. To get to net zero, if you're on electricity, and the province already committed to make our electricity 100% renewable. So if you are entirely on electricity, then you're probably going to get to net zero or very, very close. And if you're currently on gas, there is an option to also switch to renewable natural gas, which also will reduce your emissions to near zero. So this could be accomplished without necessarily a significant burden of upgrading the buildings.
Rome?
Just a statement about the wording that we're using here. It's net zero. The previous slide was zero carbon. There just needs to be some consistent languaging around some of those things just for continuity through the document. That's just a comment like that.
Okay, yeah, I think it is two different definitions. Pardon?
Then it has to be clearly spelled out what the differences are, I think, because I think those terms become confusing.
Yeah, zero carbon is like without burning things. Net zero is sort of like it all cancels out. You can burn stuff, but there must be some type of, it could be, or renewable, which
yeah, when we're trying to stick to the net zero emissions terminology, but we might have missed a few zero carbon that was left over from previous drafts.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there's nobody wanting to put a motion forward, we'll move on to the next one.
Just so that I'm clear, are we changing it or we're okay to keep it the way it is?
At the moment is kept the way it is unless there's a committee member that wants to put forward a motion to change it.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, the next one is there's a proposed new transportation policy. And the proposed wording is build a minimum grid active transportation infrastructure in the town centers. So I want to get a sense of whether this seems clear enough to the committee, and should this be, is this something that I want to see in the city plan, or perhaps it's something in the action plan?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is one I think that was Councillor Bonner had put in there, and I think it is something that we do want to see built out, some form of grid that connects the main nodes of the city, and there's an established active transportation network. So I think that was what was being going for. I don't know. It would be good to get feedback from staff if this. I think some policy along this line needs to happen. My concern is that it's a little less ambitious than it could be for a 10-year plan. But if there's any staff comment on this. Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would say that the minimum grid concept has been folded into not only the land use but all of the work around the urban centers, as well as the transportation mobility. So there's the active transportation and mobility schedule that talks about that minimum grid, but then some of the samples of what an urban center looks like shows that as well. So I hope that helps.
It is present in some of the languaging. It's not defined as a clear policy objective, and I think that it would be helpful to have. I think potentially something like that. Is there any other comments from staff on this?
We'd want to define what minimum grid actually means then, I think.
Okay. Is there any suggestions on languaging that would articulate the intention of establishing, or does the language exist elsewhere? I don't see it in the transportation items that says that the city will build a connection between each of the urban nodes, an active transportation connection between each of the urban nodes.
If I may, Chair, I'm looking at number 4 here, and it doesn't talk about between town centers. It says build minimum active transportation grid in town centers. And to Mr. Sims' point, what is a definition of a minimum grid? I mean, is there such a definition, or is we talked about minimum grids for the last 3 years?
Bill? Oh, sorry, Bill and Christy. You got your hand up there, Bill. I don't know if you want to speak or not.
Sorry, I meant to take it down earlier. Sorry,
okay.
Chair.
Kirsty.
I may through the chair, the terms, we have 3 definitions for the active transportation routes, 3 tiers, and there's a priority route, a secondary route, and a tertiary route. And the definition of the priority routes is that they link urban centers and that they become the commuter spines between the urban centers, which are our mobility hubs. So the goal is that connecting those, the ENN Trail is actually a really good example of one of those primary routes that helps to connect Country Club malls to Nanaimo North Town Center to Woodgrove, where the focus will be for transit. So that is in our definition. It might not be clear enough for our upper level, I think it's called Tier 1 active mobility route. So the word grid is not used, but it is by definition the primary active mobility route. And then the secondary ones are intended to help get people from neighborhoods to those mobility hubs. So there is a clear hierarchy of 3 levels. And the third is more of a recreational route that is also connected to that network.
Okay, and this is in the mobility section, of which we haven't really reviewed directly. And so my suggestion on this one, Dawn, is that we put in the parking lot or the bike rack, and you do a bit more work on that, and it can come forward at the GPC if there's more work needs to be done on that. So
I'll check and I'll read through the transportation stuff as well.
Perfect.
We can find the exact page numbers and share with you as well, if that would be helpful after this meeting.
Sure. Okay,
Kirsty, thank you. If other committee members need to speak and I'm not noticing your hand wave, just unmute and let me know verbally, just because with the screen shared, I can't see everybody's hands go up. So we will move on to the next item.
So we also added 2 new policy statements, and both of them are from the climate resilience strategy and are related to incorporating climate resilient design. One is related to kind of large new construction projects and building retrofits, and the other ones are meant to target new and existing homes, smaller buildings. Next. So new comments in the section of climate adaptation and hazard management. The first one is related to the title. There's some comments about whether we want to retitle this to climate adaptation and hazard mitigation or climate adaptation and mitigation. I guess maybe someone can speak directly to it, and we can see if that really resonates with the committee or not.
Jerome, I believe that was a suggestion that was put forward by you. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's just for clarity. I mean, hazard management, I mean, we can all come up with our own definition of hazard management and what that might mean. Mitigation is a widely used term, is very specific, and it's very closely related to climate adaptation and mitigation in terms of impacts and impacts that include the hazardous component of these impacts. So to me, it's just an appropriate word to put in there, and it's clearer in terms of wording. So that was really the reason for it.
Great. Question to staff. If we switch out management and put in mitigation, is there going to be some meaning lost, and will it distort sort of the interpretation of things, or does it appropriately capture what we're trying to do? Bill?
It's an appropriate change in my view.
Okay. So, Jerome, do you want to put a motion forward just about changing that?
Sure. How do we do that?
To say, I move to change.
I move to replace that word with the hazard management word with hazard mitigation. All in
seconded.
favor.
Oh, seconded by Don. All in favor? Carried. Okay, next.
The next one is related to the 3 policy statements under communication and capacity building. Some feedback suggests that they seem to be a bit too vague and weak, and it's not really clear what success will look like. So the question is, would you like the staff to strengthen them and articulate better, what success might look like in this section?
Any comments from the committee?
Don't have those in front of me, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm happy to read it out. So the first one is about improve community capacity and resilience by increasing awareness of climate change, its expected local impacts, and how individuals, business, community groups, and others can contribute to mitigation and adaptation. The second one is support community and neighborhood organizations that help community members prepare for climate change and other hazards. And the next one is encourage and incentivize community members and local businesses to adopt mitigation adaptation strategies to make homes, business, and local economy resilient to changing climate.
I think I remember putting forward this one that we're looking here, which is, I guess, number 3.
Yeah.
And the reason is I just wanted to, if we're going to mitigate things, we have to improve things, not necessarily help. So I would only be interested in helping community members that want to improve their capacity, right? And to me, that was the question: is improving the capacity and the resilience of the community. That's why I just thought it was a much more stronger way of wording that.
Okay. So when I look at the wording on number 3, I'm kind of like, my understanding of number 1 or number three without the changes is that we would go and we're going to help some community and neighborhood level organizations prepare. So the city would actively engage with them and help them organize in a fashion and educate in a fashion that will help them prepare. Where the change is that if there's community groups out there that are working on improving capacity and resiliency, we'll support them. So it's kind of like exclusionary to groups that are already doing that. Am I misreading that, Don?
No, I think you're misreading it, honestly. Mostly it's just to improve the capacity and resilience of the community. So, I mean, they both speak to it, right? But the second one specifically says the capacity, right? So the first one just says help community members prepare for climate change and other hazards, which is about as vague as you can get. And the next one is to improve their capacity and resilience.
Okay.
Which I think it's the wording is stronger, but it says basically, help them prepare for change.
Great.
So,
sorry, go ahead, Jerome.
Could 2 or 3 of these just be collapsed into one broad statement that includes the various types of communities, business, individuals, and just speak to what Councillor Bonner is saying, which is, basically improve or increase the capacity to adapt and mitigate, the climate change situations or the effects of climate change. That's what it boils down to in terms of increasing the resilience and the capacity. It's in reference to a very specific situation, which is adapting to climate change and mitigating the effects of it.
Okay.
Yeah, what he said.
I think that these are important policies in the sense that we do as a city need to engage with the community in different sectors and raise awareness and build capacity. And I think that's an essential role that we need to be taking in terms of climate leadership. So I know Councillor Brown put forward the mention of trying to strengthen the language to it. And I think it's partly in reaction to in general words like encourage and support that might be a little bit vague on the specifics. So if there is possibility of strengthening the language and including the edits that Councillor Bonner put forward, and considering collapsing them all together, it depends on I think, Ting, that you've got a very good idea on what needs to be accomplished in this realm. From what I remember, there's a bit of an expertise of yours. So I think that, if we can move that language will be strengthened, to strengthen language for this section, policy section on community capacity and engagement, and that edits that include Councillor Bonner's edits be included.
And also considering streamline or collapsing the 3.
And consider streamlining or collapsing the 3 if appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. So there's 3 things, I guess, we're looking at: strengthening the language, collapsing these 3 actions, and also incorporating Councillor Bonner's comments, especially the highlights around capacity and resilience of the community.
Correct. Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, seconded by Director Don, and then Lisa, just to speak to it.
It's more a procedural question for Sky. Do we need to read out Councillor Bonner's edits?
We do.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking like Sky.
So we could include those. If someone could just say them in point form, then we can include those.
Okay, so the motion would be that the committee, that the
Councillor Gesselbrock, we do have, or I do have the motion. I just don't have Councillor Bonner's specific edits. So if you could say those in point form, or if he could say those, then we could incorporate those into the motion.
It's on the slide, right? That's the.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'll say support community and neighborhood level organizations that improve capacity and resilience of the community.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, new comments. This is still in the same like climate adaptation section. So this is related to the policy statement from 1.2.6 to 1.2.8. They seem to have overlapping ideas and strategies. Would you like staff to streamline and clarify these three statements?
Yes. Is that good enough?
You want to put in a motion there, Don?
The motion would be for planning and strategy C 1.2.6 to 1.2.8 to streamline those items. Is that good enough?
The streamline and clarify.
Streamline and clarify, yeah.
We have a seconder.
Just to ask the question, Ting, is that enough detail if they just say streamline and clarify, or do you need it actually streamlined and clarified?
I think that should be sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Second by Jerome. All in. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, so the next one is related to the language in 1.2.8 and 1.2.9. So currently we have, words like discourage, redirect, encourage, to avoid, and then, there's a suggestion to use stronger terms in describing these policies. So the question is, would you like to see stronger language in these two policy statements?
Thank you. I think just from the policy statements, so they revolve around areas prone to flooding, landslide, or sea level rise. And then regular coastal flood plans. And so basically do we try to avoid buildings being put in these areas of flooding and sea level rise, or can we prohibit? Question to staff is like, why wouldn't we just prohibit? Does it kind of, if we have that language in, do we run into legal struggles with it, or is it just a matter of kind of leaving the door a little bit open for something that we don't want to have happen? I don't know if any staff want to take that on, answering that, the downfalls of having the word prohibit. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody jump at that conversation. Lisa?
Well, it is a tricky one. I might call a little bit on Mr. Sims. The challenge is with the word prohibit is, again, with the things. So, for example, we're looking at, instead of discourage and redirect existing future development away from areas prone to flooding and landscape. So if you were to say the word prohibit, that that wording you really have to shift, because you're talking about prohibiting existing future development, and then how are you going to do that? Is the province going to help us compensate and purchase those properties? You know, what does that put on us? And Mrs. Sims, I don't know if you have any thoughts in your more lengthy experience with some of these challenges. I just see the potential for some challenges in terms of our jurisdiction and authority, and then also, yeah, it's tricky. It's easier with new, but even with that.
Yeah, I think I would echo your comments, Lisa. It's a challenge, but at the same time, it's something that we want to highly, I don't like to use the word discourage, because it is, but we do really want to chase people out of these zones as much as possible. So maybe
it's one of those things where the province could really help us out. Sorry, through the chair. Sorry, Bill. In terms of what powers we have and what ability we have to, particularly with private property, it's so much easier when it's publicly owned land, because we have so much more leeway around where we put, you know, what we do with our parks and where we put our infrastructure. So I'm going to actually, I see Jerome's got some thoughts.
Jerome.
It's more of a question. I'm wondering, behind this, what are the tools available to enforce this or to make it work? And so in a way, the language is dependent on what's behind it to enforce it. And perhaps the language simply needs to be something along the lines of not increasing the existing amount of areas that are there, right? So in the way, you know, I guess you get what I'm saying. Part of how you formulate this, you could keep the word discourage if the tool behind it is actually very strong and imposes very strong limits on how you allocate permits to develop in certain areas. It would achieve the goal, irrespective of what word we use. And so maybe in terms of wording, maybe it's, you know, not increasing the areas of a particular characteristic beyond what we already have, right? So that means new developments can't go there or can't build within those certain boundaries, and then existing buildings can't move from those boundaries anymore. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill?
Thanks, Chair. One example, like it's a big philosophical debate that really hasn't happened yet. And one example might be a low-lying house subject to sea level rise. Whose responsibility is it to mitigate that hazard to that house? Is it the local governments to purchase the property and say, you know, on you go? Is it the property owner that's enjoyed the property and has widespread knowledge of the fact that the sea is rising and they've chosen to stay there? Is it the provincial government? Because I don't know that that's going to happen. There's that sort of wide knowledge around this. So it's that philosophical question that hasn't happened yet. And so that's why perhaps the challenge around the wording here. And I think Jerome's hit it with what tools do we have? So keep people out, of course, but yeah, anyways, those are just some more thoughts. I probably muddied the water more than anything.
Lisa?
Actually, not at all. I mean, like down in the States, they provide, like FEMA will do things like say, okay, you will not be compensated if you continue to rebuild your house in the floodplain, but we will offer you the option to lift it up and put it over here. And right now we have not got that kind of federal or provincial backing, but what tools we do have is we do have our development permit areas. We have other tools that allow us to mitigate, but not completely avoid. And what we're talking about here is just trying to avoid. So you don't have a hazard if nobody is living in a hazardous area and you've accommodated and adapted. So I think what we're running up against here is we do have some tools. Are they strong enough to simply pick people up and relocate them without the liability of having to buy all of those properties? In an ideal world, we would have the tools that, you know, we have that. But where I see an opportunity here is again with that advocacy piece in our actions to continue to talk to federal and provincial governments about what they're going to do to help us meet these challenges when it comes to private property and these types of risks. Actually, an area I feel fairly passionate about. So.
Great. I think with this one, I think it is worth having more debate. I think it does get to a philosophical question. I think that we do need to make a stronger stand on this stuff. Like, you can kind of waffle, and I think we just need to push. And then I think it's going to force the conversation with the province and everybody around, you know, who ends holding the bag when an area floods. So I'd move to change the language from avoid to prohibit. If somebody wants to second that, and we can vote on it, and then it goes to the council to discuss.
So what would be the total wording if we use prohibit? What would it read like?
It would read discourage and redirect existing, discourage, redirect, and prohibit future development away from areas prone to flooding, landslip, or sea level rise. And then the next one would say regular update coastal flooding plains and regulations to prohibit public and private development in areas at risk of anticipated sea level rise and where development exists to be, yeah.
So there's an issue of timelines there, because when you're talking about anticipated sea level rise, there are various levels at different times. And so you can paint yourself into a corner very easily here. So you could be imposing prohibitions on developments that, you know, you set boundaries for events that don't happen for 50 years or 100 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the answer is to that. I think I like the beginning of it, but and I mean, I think it's a reasonable statement to have, if only from the standpoint of liability to the city. If you allow people to build on areas that you know to be unstable, you have some responsibility that way.
Yeah. So. I think it can go either way. I think there are a lot of subtleties to be worked out here. I think just for a matter of moving the discussion along, we can vote on it. It either doesn't go forward for more discussion with council, because I'm sure this will precipitate that, or it kind of ends here and it just stays with a void.
For my money, I don't know the rules existing, all the regulations in the city, but it would be interesting, or it'd be worthwhile perhaps to take a statement like that and weigh it against the existing regulations to see if there are any loopholes that you're either creating or leaving wide open that are undesirable. And if you already meet sort of these criteria in terms of your existing planning policies, in terms of where you allow development, it's basically a non-issue. And you just make a broad statement that, you know, basically is your position statement on this. But beyond that, it's okay. Like, you're taking care of the situations that might arise from your existing planning and zoning policies.
Okay. Wally?
Yeah, you might be a little careful with this. Just, I know we've had some presentations recently from lawyers about things like flooding and so forth, and where engineering standards have been in place, and courts have looked at it, and there may have been old engineering standards, and that was acceptable at the time. And the court said, but what did you know today that you didn't really take into consideration? So there's a lot of things that you need to do. You might have a look at what, as I understand what Alberta did after the big floods. They defined 3 zones of land. They designed those that clearly are okay, that you can go ahead and build on within the regulations. There's a clear area that clearly is not okay, and I'm not sure what the definition of how they defined that line as to what the flood lines or rises are. They don't have sea level problems, fortunately for them. But there's an intermediate zone that they said you could build because the risk is relatively low, but there is a risk, and you're going to sign a waiver saying that anything that happens is not municipal responsibility. You might have a look at that, because that sort of opens up land for building, but does not obligate the community. And there's certainly been cases in BC where that should have been done. So if you want to take the risk and you want to build there, we're okay to let you build there, but don't come back to us if you got a problem. So you might have a look at the Alberta system and see if that's helpful to us.
Great. So just for interest of times, folks, I've moved a motion to change the language. If there's no seconder, we'll just move on, and there's no offense taken, but just make a decision here. So I am not seeing a seconder. on the motion, and so the motion dies. We'll move on here. Next slide.
Okay, so we're moving on to the next section, urban tree canopy, natural areas, and greenways. We made some editorial changes, but no major content change. We removed one policy statement because that is captured in another area that we think that is probably sufficient. Next, please. Some new comments. First is just a kind of a language. Do we want to replace rainwater attenuation with surface runoff management? Do we have any issue with that?
I'll propose that. That was my comment. I think that surface runoff management is a broader, more encompassing term for rainwater attenuation, which I'm not even sure what that means in terms of attenuating what? The amount of water, the impact of water on the ground, under what circumstances? So it was just for clarity then, more than anything.
So do we need a vote on that one, or can we? Is it already been changed to surface runoff?
It has not been changed.
Okay.
So through the chair, if Jerome's moving it, we would require a seconder.
Seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. So the next one is related to policy statement 1.3.1 on page 59. Currently it says, endeavor to maintain and expand the city's trees canopy in balance with other desired land use outcomes. So there is a suggestion that to clarify the goal of this in the statement, because it's not perhaps clear enough what other desired land use outcomes or what is the objective of this this statement.
Yeah.
Would you like staff to clarify and add some clarify the goal of this policy statement?
Yes, I think that that would be important. I do have a potential alternative of that policy statement. I think that just looking at these policies where we want to have achieve a goal and a value around tree canopy, and then balanced with other land uses, it's not clear, the goals of what we're trying to achieve. And so articulating that we are trying to achieve a tree canopy that looks to, preserve some form and measure of biodiversity, ecosystem functioning, human health and well-being, those and climate adaptation. Those would be values that we could build a policy around that says that, when we do a development, we're taking this into account on how many trees need to be there or whatnot.
Great.
So
just to articulate and spell out the benefits.
The benefits and values. And so I would be happy moving that that goal C1, that we clarify the goal of C1.3.1 in the policy statement. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Jerome. Any discussion? Just building on that comment, I think that the values that we are trying to optimize in the face of other competing values would be biodiversity, climate adaptation, ecological function, and human health and well-being. And there is, quite a lot of bodies of work that provide a little bit of bounding on what that actually means in terms of tree canopy in urban settings. So I can send a suggestion of a potential wording of something as staff goes through to look at a potential change. Item 3, oh, Lisa?
Three, yeah.
My apologies. I think
Sky.
Sky is going to catch. I'll let Sky go because I think she's going to see.
Thank you, Chair. We just need to call the vote on that one.
Oh, sorry. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Great.
Um,
The next
Item-
one. So the next policy is regarding planting trees. Right now, the wording only mention new neighborhoods and redevelopment sites. So the suggestion is to add tree planting to also existing neighborhoods.
Anybody want to move that?
Can I ask a question first?
Yeah.
I think some of that language should be either adapted or combined with retention of trees and replanting of trees that support. So to me, in a sense, I'm not sure if it's a policy or an action that supports the previous policy. And I could see it as either. So either that needs clarification, or if it's distinct enough from the previous one that we've just discussed in terms of clarifying the goals of the policy and expanding it to justify, the main goal of it, this turns into basically an action in support of that prior item of C 1.3.1. Does that make sense?
So what I'm hearing is that if we can clarify policy 1.3.1, that seems like an overall goal, and this policy really reads more like an action. And
correct.
So, yeah.
And I think if you want to make it even connect better with the potential action, some of the wording in 1.3.2 could be rolled into 1.3.1 under the justification of biodiversity, and so that tree retention, replacing with similar species that are cut in the case that you do, all that stuff, right? So those are detailed actions that you do to support that policy, but I'm not sure if that is really needed as a standalone policy.
I think that's a good point. And my preference would be to, even if it is an action, it gets downgraded to an action that potentially the new, that existing neighborhoods does get added to that policy action.
Okay.
So maybe we could consider moving it, having it included there, and then staff can, once that first policy of that section, goals and objectives, gets a little bit more clarified, then staff can make a decision whether to move this one into an action item or to just maintain it here. So, so I think that is a good point. So just get it on the table so we can move through it. I move that existing neighborhoods is added to policy C132, not just new redevelopment sites. Is there a seconder? Dawn, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 4.
And I think we may have duplicated this point, but this next one is really in response to the comments that we heard at the last meeting around food security. So the current policy statement 1.3.4 says, consider ecosystem biodiversity and resilience when replacing or planting new trees in public spaces. So there's a suggestion to specify that we'll consider fruit and nut trees. And I believe, and maybe Kirsty can speak directly to this, I believe that we do have this food security covered under healthy nanaimo section. So the question is that, do we still want to add food security consideration into this policy, or are we satisfied with the way that they're captured in the healthy Nanaimo section?
Yeah, I would say that my preference would be to have it integrated in to the urban forestry, the urban tree canopy policies, just to have it cross-pollinated. I don't think it'll be adequately addressed and effectively operationalized just in the healthy community section, as that kind of operates more in the recreation side of things. Is there any other comments on that? And if not, I'd move a motion here.
Through the chair, it might be, this might be another section that we can send you more details on, but there is a section, like a subchapter in healthy under food security. And it includes food forests, edible landscapes, permaculture, and other ways of integrating edibles in appropriate landscapes. So there is a subchapter under healthy, not related to recreation, but it's related to, it's called food security.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I didn't mean to not say the thing. I did see the section there in the food security portion about exploring new opportunities to expand edible landscapes and city property. I'm not paraphrasing it exactly, and I think that is a good policy, and I think that it would be useful to have it specifically addressed in the tree canopy. I'm not sure what other thoughts are from folks, but if any other committee members want to speak to this, and if not, I'd be happy to move some recommendations here.
And through the chair, I wonder if it is okay to allow us to at least to use the consistent terms and the languages in the other food security chapter when we integrate, when you propose to integrate that into this policy under tree canopy.
In what, just expand on that.
Sure, yeah, I think the original proposed wording is fruit and not trees, and I think that in the food security chapter, they use terms like edible landscape.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I think that the edible landscape is great terminology for the food security, and I think it'll complement it. I guess my interpretation is that there is a specific urban forestry, there's the urban tree canopy specifically, policies around that, and I think that this is just very targeted in terms of direction around decision making on trees, and that also the edible landscape, I think, is an important addition to consideration on city properties and that elsewhere. But yeah, if I'm not, is there any other comments? And I'll just move these to put these on the table. So I move to add consideration for food security. So it's policy C 134, I believe, and to include food security with ecosystem biodiversity and resiliency when replacing or planting new trees in public spaces. And so that's a motion. There's a seconder or no seconder. Seconded by Harvey. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Or opposed? Carried.
Next slide. I think that Do you feel like this number, the number 5, gets
So-
addressed in the last?
Yeah, this is a suggestion that was put forward by me, and I would like to put a specific policy on the table for that, and have discussion around it. So maybe I'll move it, and then we can discuss if we want to include it or not. So I'd move that a policy be created that the city is to increase, prioritize, and include the planting of fruit and nut trees in public spaces where hard infrastructure and safe transportation will not be impacted by potential falling fruits. Is there anybody that would like to second that policy statement? Seconded by Wally. Any discussion? Guy.
Sorry, could you read out the last part of that again?
Yeah,
Thank you.
so the policy statement is to be included in the tree section, that the city is to increase, prioritize, and include the planting of fruit and nut trees in public spaces where hard infrastructure and safe transportation will not be impacted by falling fruits. Any discussion?
Chair?
Yep.
Doesn't that fall under the definition of don't do stupid things?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I'm seriously, like, who would do that anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I know it's a concern, so it's just good to spell it out.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next item.
Okay, the next one is related to the terms used in a number of policies under natural areas and urban tree canopy and natural areas. Replace terms such as consider, encourage, seek to protect, to replace them with simpler or maybe stronger language. That's something that that is desirable.
Yes.
Always.
So would there be a motion? Anybody want to entertain a motion on that?
Well, that's a hard one, because what is simpler and stronger language?
Okay. Ting, or do you require some discussion and more clarity, direction on this?
Yeah, I think that one suggested edits to, for example, policy 1.3.13 is just, strive to find creative solutions that protect. Can we say, just say protect? So I guess that'll be an example of, making it simpler and shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And the stronger.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, 100%. I just, in terms of commentary, I think I've got these written down, but there's like wording kind of like seek to, or will endeavor, kind of those words, like they do seem they unnecessarily qualify the verb, as opposed to just doing the verb. So it is a matter, like, exactly how it impacts action. I don't know how to say it, but it can read as like, we want to do this, but we're leaving it a little bit open to like not doing it by saying things like that we can like seek to, or that. And I'm not sure if there's much literature or discussion in the policy world about that, but I don't know if staff want to comment about the usage of languaging like that in policy documents, and if it does detract from operationalization or commitment to it, or is it sort of like a risk-averse orientation to avoid painting oneself in a corner? Wally?
In general, we've dealt with a fair number of these. Municipal Insurance Association has always warned us, don't say you're going to do something if you don't, because you could be sued for it. They're always saying, set it as a council objective. So if you say, we will do this by 2022 or something, and you don't do it, you're actually leaving yourself open for a lawsuit, according to the Insurance Association. So they're saying state the objective of, then if you don't fulfill it, you've got reasons. But so you got to be careful how definitive a statement is.
Right. So there is legal implications that you've come across. Lisa?
The other piece that's a consideration is if you think this document as it is a visioning and aspirational document, and what it should do is be flexible enough and not put it at risk, as Wally said, to allow for a range of creative actions that council can resource and budget. And one of the challenges that we could face, because this document, where some of the language will have legal implications with certain things, we may have to run them by a lawyer, and we will be, is that we could potentially fetch a future council's decision around. So say you say, we're going to prohibit all developments in a certain area, and then in order to do that, the action that we have to take is actually purchase that. Now, a future council may not be able to reallocate budget in another area that they have a priority of. So I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself right. Maybe I can look at Mr. Sims and see if he can jump in and help me a little bit here.
I think it's a hybrid, Chair, between what Wally said and what Lisa said. Really, we're trying to, there is the need to be careful. Like when you start to handcuff yourself with very strong policy language, you do put yourself in a very difficult position in the future. And at this point, it's hard to predict what that might be. Go back to the sea level, the city will avoid all sea level rise, or that the city will mitigate all. It just puts us into a position where the unpredictability of climate change, as an example, is something that's beyond our control. But we've committed ourselves to something that we don't have any control over, if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, this is an important discussion, and I want to continue it. I know that Dawn has a pressing need, has to go somewhere, and I just want to make sure where we're at in terms of quorum if he leaves, if it's going to impact our ability to continue working through these suggested edits.
Thank you, Chair. So we have 6 members here now. We need 5 for quorum, but I believe that Jerome needed to leave as well as 6:25. So if they both leave, the meeting would adjourn.
So Jerome, you got to leave in 5 minutes?
I got to leave in 2 minutes. I got a class in 7 minutes, so yeah.
Okay. So Dawn, it is on you, and I don't know if we can give you a 15-minute recess, 20-minute recess, so that you don't feel horrible about yourself, or do you need to go to a different location?
Well, it's in the other room, but if I leave, then if I'm not in the room, then you're going to lose quorum. So I don't know if you're going to get all through all this stuff the next half hour anyway. Like we're not even halfway through.
Yeah, I think we can get farther though, for sure.
Can I just make a 1 point before I leave? I understand the liability angle that Wally's talking about, but there's just a language wordsmithing issue here, because when I look at that sentence, strive to find creative solutions that protect, the action is on strive, when the action is meant to be on protect. The goal is not to strive to find something, the goal is to protect. So there's some basic wording that confuses the actual idea, the fundamental idea, which is to protect something. So I get that there's 2 parallel things going on. There's being careful about what you promise to do and creating a liability for yourself, but there's also some sentences that are interleaved into many of these things that don't make sense in terms of the action that we're going for, or the goal that we're going for. When I see that example, the goal is protecting, not striving. But the way it's written, it strives as the emphasis.
So Ting, would a motion
through that?
So Ting, would a motion that says remove vague terms on page 60, basically how it's written here on the slide, moving that statement would that provide sufficient direction and clarity to make strengthen of what we can of the language and remove vagaries?
I think we may be able to have something like direct staff to consider stronger, simpler language to the extent possible.
Okay. Anybody like to move that? Moved by Dawn, seconded by Jerome. Discussion. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
I have to go.
Thanks, Jerome.
Okay.
Can move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay, I think this one should be pretty straightforward. So just remove where possible and replace with the language that the city does and will continue to do.
Anybody like to move that? Moved by Dawn. Seconded by Wally. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. The next one's around greenways. There are 3 policy statements under greenways. They seem to have similar justification. So the suggestion is that maybe separate that justification from the policy statements and simplify those policies with less detail about setbacks and constraints. I think those were mentioned in C 1.3.18. So the question is, would you like staff to consider simplifying or streamline these policies?
Okay. Any comments on this? Not seen any. I'm happy with 3 statements on greenways. I think it's an area that we can double down on, and if it makes it look more important to just stick with that. So maybe we'll just leave it as is. Next slide.
Okay. Next slide, very minor. So next slide. Okay, just remove continue to on page 63.
Yeah.
Okay.
I moved to remove it.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Excellent. And then this next one that we're just saying that we have to remove the green and affordable from the heading. The next one.
Bill?
Sorry, Chair, I wanted to just maybe that previous couple of statements about remove, continue.
Yeah.
One of the things we were sort of conscious of is we didn't want the community left with the impression that we haven't done this before and hey, here's a brand new idea. This work has been ongoing. So that's just a bit of rationale for the language, if that helps.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I do get that impression, and I think that, yeah, we want to make sure that the city is acknowledged for all the good work that's been doing, and many of these policies have been, and it's sometimes yeah, it's a difficult one, but I can understand where it's coming from, and it, yeah.
Okay, would you like to continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're in the water, sewer, and the stormwater services. So policy 1.5.3 is a question whether this should be placed in the enabled prosperous goal 5 or stay in green. It seems fairly operational, but
yeah. It was interesting, and this is sort of a question on structure of the framework, is sort of the language of affordable and green. you know, the green policies that fit within the outer ring of the donut really are about making sure that we operate within the environmental limits of our region, our location. And affordability is definitely like a human need that does impact those things, but it's more around affordability and kind of making sure that our city is affordable, and which would fall more into the center area. And so it's one of those things where there's policy around a department like engineering, and that sort of organizes policy, and then there's organizing around outcomes, and it's sort of, we're trying to integrate those two together. And so I think that if we can tease them apart and move those into the right areas where they fit within our larger organizing framework is good. And so I would support moving the items from these items into the enabled part of the city plan, the enabled and prosperous. So do any staff or committee members have comments on this? Nope. Okay. I move that they're moved into the prosperous section. These two C153 and C1512. Seconded by Don. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Okay.
Next slide.
The next one, the next one is 1.5.12. Yeah, going back. So the question is whether this item should be in the action plan or in the city plan.
I'm fine with it in there.
Yeah, I'd look to staff if there's any comments from staff on this, along with committee members.
Here, I think this can stay. I think it's a good policy statement.
Okay. All right. I'd say keep it as is. I'm not seeing any opposition to doing that. All right. Next.
Okay, next slide.
Sorry, folks, if I'm being curt, and I'm just trying to move us through here, and I appreciate everybody's willingness to stay focused on the goal here.
Mm-hmm. So the suggestion is these three policies seems to overlap. Would you like to direct staff to look at rewarding and refocusing them so that they have kind of a clear action statements?
Any comments from the committee on this?
Not particularly for me, no.
Okay. Ting or staff, do you folks think that it could use rewording or focusing, or are good at it as is?
Yeah, I think these do talk about different ideas, but we can maybe we can do some editing to help make some better precision around them.
Yeah, if needed, it's not a critical thing. All right, let's move on to the next one. Should servicing costs and green policies go under enabled prosperous goal 5 under heading cost effective financially and sustainable infrastructure? This is one that jumped out at me that again could be moved to a different section because it doesn't really talk about anything environmental, and it's more about affordability. So I'd move to have it moved to the goal 5 in the official community plan. Seconded by Don. Any discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next slide.
One. So yeah, there is a change in terms of the organic matter to landfill.
Okay, and this basically was taken out the goal for 2030.
Yes.
Any comments from the committee on this?
This is what I brought up. I didn't see why we couldn't do that. I fully understand that the RDN owns the landfill, and we're not going to stop people from area, whatever, putting organic matter into it. But the idea is that there shouldn't be any reason why we can't stop Nanaimo from putting organic matter into it.
Oh, sorry.
And I just didn't, I thought that 8 years is probably plenty of time to do that. Now, I recognize from what Wally said that if we said it's going to be done by 2030 and we don't, we're going to get in trouble. That won't be my problem. It'll be somebody else's, but I don't want to put my problems on somebody else. So I'm willing to tweak that a little bit, but I think that we should really work towards eliminating organic matter to the landfill by 2030. I think Wally has his hand up.
Wally?
Well, I think you're saying work toward. If you said you would achieve it, that's another area. And if you don't, then you leave yourself open. But if you work toward and it's sort of an objective or goal, fine. And I think that is some of the changes I recall from the RDN master plan and request from the minister also was to expand the organics program and have more control over the private sector, the haulers, and those waste not picked up by the city. Because they're two very different areas. Like your recycling numbers are what the city picks up. It's not what the city in total recycle. It's what's in the city garbage. So that's a bit misleading. So with the changes in the RDN, it may well be achievable because I know the objectives of getting the authorities to do this was to broadband a number of these programs, specifically things like the organics.
100%. Bill?
Yeah, so I'm thinking Lisa is expecting me to fall on my sword for this one because it was my edit that took the 2030 out. And not only, it was really around, this is the broad-based policy, and putting a timeline in it makes it on something that we're trying to control with human behavior, just felt a little bit inaccurate, I guess is the right word. So that was the motivation for taking the 2030 out.
Okay.
And what does eliminate mean? 100%, 99%?
107%.
So I think we should definitely have that timeline on and push forward. It's something that needs to happen, and I think Nanaimo could be the first to do it. So I would support returning it back to how it was before, or what was voted on, to work to eliminate organic matter sent to the regional landfill by 2030. Don, do you want to move that?
Sure.
Moved by Don. We have a seconder. Seconded by Wally.
Sorry, Bill.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Great.
Okay. So this is still on solid waste management. The question is, should we clarify what supporting RDN's solid waste management plan looks like? Right now, I think it's pretty general. Is there a desire to clarify? Let's say.
King, was this something that was submitted by in the feedback as something that we wanted to do by committee members?
Yes, so we've received comments on this one, just asking what does it look like? Because right now it just says support the RDN solid waste management plan.
Okay. Wally?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that means because it's a split responsibility, and the RDN plan really has to do with their responsibilities. The city has collection, but then you turn all the stuff over to the RDN. So
Right.
I guess in one way you're supporting the plan. I don't know what else you would do that would implement that policy other than what you do now.
Right. I mean, would this clarify it more, like support meeting the 90% diversion target of the regional solid waste plan, or I'm not sure who provided that that feedback.
That is from Councillor Tyler Brown.
Okay.
So I think putting a number in again, you know, you could, if we could say the 90% diversion, if the solid waste management plan changes to 92 or 95, then
Right.
So
That makes sense.
yeah, this is a, maybe it's a bit wishy-washy, and as Wally said, it's something we're going to do anyhow, but it's not a bad thing to have as a policy statement.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, and in the vacuum of having an alternative or a thing proposed for this, I say we skip over it because we don't have anything better to put in its place at this moment, unless there's somebody from the committee wants to make a suggestion. Seeing none, moving on.
Okay, so we're almost there. So the next one is around, I think it's a question to this policy around fee structure, whether we should set a variable fee structure. And I'm not sure if this is something we can address here and now. So might, you know, take into consideration when we're developing the action plan.
And Ting, do you remember where this suggestion came from?
I think this might be, is this from Councillor Bonner?
Well, sort of, not so much the 4 Rs and that stuff, but I just know that we have the capacity or the capability of charging, of weighing waste that we pick up and monitoring it. So this was a conversation years ago, even the last council, when we were looking at picking up our own waste, was that we could possibly incentivize people who don't fill up their cans by not charging them as much. I just think it's something that we have the capability of doing, and we should be looking at it, but I'm just not sure if this is the way we're going to do it. That's sufficiently vague.
Chair,
Yeah,
I think I can't see there's a black
go
box.
for it, Bill. And then I think I got Wally.
So I think setting this was the intent of this particular policy, to set that fee structure to be variable, as exactly as Don said, to incentivize throwing out less waste. The idea of weighing each pick is not feasible. We've tried to do that, but there may be, you know, you can set it by the size of cart and the number of times we pick it up. But it certainly is an intent to provide a minimum level of service at the minimum cost, and then anything additional. It's similar to how we do water. So I think that's the intent of this policy. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Anybody have got any more comments on that? If it needs more work, we might have to come back to it and address it, but looks like Don's giving the thumbs up. So we'll move to the next one.
Okay, so just simple like clarification, you know, what constitutes city operated recycling services. I think that's the comment.
Okay. Does anybody want to speak to this one? I don't know if anybody had made this comment. I'm not seeing anybody. So in the absence of that, we will move to the next one.
Okay, so new comments on the brownfield sites. So policy 1.7.2, increase community awareness of economics, environmental and social benefits. Should that be removed? I think the comment is that, is that really necessary? And is it a given?
Chair, if I can just briefly speak,
Yep.
I don't intimate familiarity with this particular one, but I think we could maybe edit it. So we definitely want to have increased community awareness around the potential for revitalized brownfield sites. So that could be the edit that we do.
Okay, increase around the potential for
the potential benefits or the potential economic, environmental, and social benefits for remediated brownfield sites.
Okay, so add in the word potential.
Yeah, and benefits of remediated sites as opposed to.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah. So a motion would be move to.
Do we need a motion? Bill just said he could do it.
Do we need a motion on this one? We'll move to edit C172 to include the language of potential benefits for remediated sites. Seconded. Anybody want to second that? Second by Wally. Sorry, go ahead, Sky.
Oh, I was just going to say that Wally's seconding it.
Okay, perfect. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay, next slide. So should 1.7.3 be removed or merged? Oops. Or merged with the one about achieve appropriate permanent redevelopment or interim uses of brownfield sites throughout the city. I guess the question is, it seems like there's some redundancy. Would you like to direct staff to look at opportunities to merge these two policies?
Fine with them as they are.
Okay. Anybody, are folks fine with the way that it is? Okay, yep, I think we just move past it.
Okay. The next one then is consider risk and public benefits, whether this needs to be spelled out or leave it as is.
I'm happy to leave as is.
Me too.
Okay.
Next one.
Yeah, everybody okay with that? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, next, so there's no major change. Yeah, so there are some general comments. I think we're at the end of it. One is the suggestion of tying the green policies to this ecological limits as outlined in the City of Donut, and also connecting services to human needs, inner circle of the donut. So that's really more of a, how to integrate that language into our, this entire chapter. Is that something that you would like to support?
I raised this one. I think just in the introduction of it, I think tying the policy section to the overall objective of trying to operate within our ecological limits as outlined in the donut, which is the main framework. I think it's important to spell that out and do the same thing for how items fit into the human needs part. So I'd move to tie these two elements into the language of at the start of the section. We have a seconder. John, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried?
Hey, I think that the next part, oh, sorry, just go back to one slide. I guess just want to check and see if there's any other change, since we have received these comments, if there's any other change we would like to see.
I've got one item. Any other committee members have any other items that need addressed?
Not today.
Nope.
Okay. One thing, Ting, is in the dark skies policy section. I've got 3 different screens here opened with edits and then the original one. But basically, in the section where it says urban lighting, it's kind of the same thing with the tree policy where there's language that balance community safety, energy, and dark sky preservation and the selection installation of new and upgraded street lighting infrastructure. It's basically like right now, there may not be as much attention applied to, like, we're going to put in street lights. We really want to make sure that they're safe and the functionality in it, and optimizing values around dark skies and light intrusions doesn't play as strong of a role. And what we want to do is increase the intentionality of, like, we don't want to make these lights any brighter than they need to be to meet the safety objectives and the functionality objectives, because we want to optimize these items around dark skies, which, you know, have human health benefits, that have ecological benefits, all these suite of things that the research is coming out, and finding language that accomplishes that. So for the street lights, for new city buildings, and then for development, which is kind of like what those 3 items address. So I do have some language, like I was trying to play around with wording on that, but would it be easiest if we just gave direction for staff to look at being able to use language that's like it's taken language that takes it for granted that we're already trying to meet certain safety and functionality design elements. We don't need to say that we need to balance things with that, because we don't. We need to just meet that standard, but we also need to make sure that, you know, we're not paying attention to the dark skies values and you know, forgetting to put on things that contain where the light's going, or, you know, choosing lights that are 3 times as bright as they need to be. So I would like to move, or I have 3 policy sort of attempts at it. I guess I'm looking for staff direction on what would be, what would provide clarity. Should I move the specific policies that I've written out, or give certain direction about how to optimize dark sky values in the selection?
Why don't you just bring him on Monday?
I could do that too.
I mean, we're going to have to sort it all out there anyway.
Yeah. So maybe I will move that policy C182, C183, and C184 be edited to express the intention of optimizing dark sky preservation in the design of street lighting, the redevelopment of sites, and the redevelopment of public buildings yeah, I guess that would be the motion. Seconded by Don. Any discussion? Until I see your camera go on.
One of the challenges we have is safety, and road safety, for which we are responsible, is our primary concern. And I think once we start getting into streetlight design, supporting dark skies, there may be opportunities by having things dim at 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But at the same time, I just want to be really cautious about focusing on dark sky at the expense of safety on our roads, because it's really about LED lighting. I know there's a lot of concerns around that from a wildlife point of view, but LED lighting provides, infinitely or significantly better safety benefits for pedestrians, cyclists, and so on. So it's a push me, pull you kind of thing. And then I'm always the urban area of the regional district, as in, kind of going back to that old Park Place in the regional growth strategy. It's going to be pretty challenging to tune that down to meet dark skies requirements.
Yeah.
So I need to toss that.
And I think maybe that's like where I think the intention maybe is getting lost, is that it's not sort of like a and or thing. It's like, okay, we need to have certain level of community safety and functionality in how our streets operate. Like, that's a given. It's an urban center. But in the face of that, we know what the design parameters are to meet those. And then outside of that, there's this big space where we can optimize these principles for dark skies, so that we're just trying to optimize it in the face of those other design considerations, as opposed to like not paying attention to them and being okay with, having extra 400 lumens when we don't need it, or to be setting the distances between them. I don't know exactly what you would adjust, but that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Wally?
Yeah, just a general statement, but it relates to all of this. Bill will be, I'm very sure, familiar with this. There was a court case in Nelson recently that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And what came out of that was some direction from the Supreme Court. And I believe now that the MIABC, the Insurance Association, has put out guidance for our communities of what is a council policy that protects the municipality versus what is an operational policy. And that really was what came out of the court. They ended up siding with the applicant other than the city, which had gone the other way. And I heard a presentation about 3 weeks ago from legal department. And if council hasn't really that, or staff aren't familiar with that, I would suggest that you do, because there's some very specific guidelines that have come out and some guidance for policies for councils, as opposed to where you're protected by a council policy and where you're not. And that's, Bill, what, it's about a month old now, since that Supreme Court case came out?
Yeah, maybe 6 weeks. Yep, that's right.
It's quite new, but it's basically what everyone is saying. I think we're all surprised with the result. But the positive thing that came out was some highest court level in Canada guidance for our communities on where council's protected in a council policy versus where you're not. Great.
Thanks, Wally. I think that this is one that's definitely going to require some more discussion, but maybe we can move the motion and it'll just kick it up to the GPC. So if there's any more comments on that, maybe we can call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, there is 1 minute left. Ting, I'll hand it over to you. I think that we covered most stuff, and I don't think that requires any more votes on stuff. So Dawn, thank you. But you can, yeah, whatever needs to be left to be said, it's all yours.
So thank you, and yes, so that was amazing that we got through all the policy changes. The remaining two topics, so one is really just want to show the committee, if we can go to the next slide. Just an example, how, the motion that came from the Environment Committee and adopted by Council back in December, how that's being reflected in the policy. And how that also, get translated into action. So we just want to be transparent about the evolution of these policies, and perhaps, since we may not have time today, but we will be, addressing this at the GPC next Monday. So if there's any questions about how, the council motions kind of turn into policies and actions, we can talk more and have a discussion around that. I don't know if that's something that that you feel that it will be appropriate.
That's great, Ting. Yeah, I think it's worth for the committee members to read through. You know, we did do a series of motions around the green policies and had specific language, and then they've been translated into official community plan and how we're organizing that with the action plan language. And there are some changes. I would suggest for committee members to read through this section. If you have any issues or questions or things that you'd like addressed, you can email myself or Dawn, and we can bring that forward for discussion at the GPC. If we have another environment committee, we can circle back and address that again. Wally, you still got your hand up. Did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Should have taken it down.
Okay, great. So yeah, this brings us to the end of, there was one item on Clean BC, but I think we'll bump that to a following meeting. Sorry, Bill, did you have? I just wanted to thank all the committee members for the focused marathon run through those edits, and also a big hand to staff that took the time to go through all the feedback, actually put it into slides and structure a bit of a conversation to make that whole process manageable. So thank you so much, Ting and Lisa, for the efforts on that. And yeah, we should get some award for managing a very complex process of dialogue between many different people for this official community plan. So if there's no other,
definitely a team effort. There are many staff behind us to make this happen, but thank you.
Right on. Yeah, we're now at the end of the time. So, Sky?
Just before we adjourn, I do need to let you know that we have question period and there's no one here to ask any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with no question periods, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Dawn, seconded by Harvey. All in favor? Adjourned. Thanks, everybody. And oh, there we go. We can see everybody again. It's so tricky when it's shared screen. I only get a strip. So.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Good work.